America and her allies fear Islamic jihadis aim to make the Horn of Africa their new haven. They want to stop them before they get there. We choppered out to a French Navy frigate. This high-tech operation is costing billions. But is this really the way to fight the war on terror in Africa, or are they just mucking about in boats? We're 60 miles out on the Lafayette. This is all part of their patrols just outside the Bab el-Mandeb Straits between Yemen and Djibouti, the coast of Africa.
Be careful.
We spotted a traditional Arab boat called a dhow. French special forces gave chase, searching for weapons. This is the boarding team, and they're going to approach the dhow. There are boats like this all over the place, and dhows particularly are used for smuggling in this area. This boat carried no guns, only petrol bound for Somalia. Back in the ship's combat control room, I spoke to Captain Francois Passy. Tell me a little bit about Enduring Freedom, the operation that you're taking part in.
This force is deployed to disrupt all the international terrorist organization activities.
Do you feel that this is part of a war on terrorism, or is this like a police action?
We are here in war. We are here to protect our country. We are here to protect the civilian world against terrorism. So it's not a police action, because I'm ready to use my gun if necessary.
But what if it's too late? What if the Horn of Africa is already a home for Islamic extremists? We hitched a ride on an aid flight into Somalia, a country which imploded 14 years ago. I returned here many times to watch as it tore itself apart. A UN military mission failed to end the violence. That was 10 years ago. And then the world washed its hands of Somalia. We landed at a bush airstrip outside the capital Mogadishu, now among the most dangerous places on earth. This is ours, yeah? It's rather convenient. Smoked glass windows. Very few foreigners dare venture beyond this point. We were the first Western journalists to enter Mogadishu for months. To stay alive, we relied on my old friend Duguf, who met us with plenty of firepower. We're driving into town. 10 guns, 3 heavy machine guns, AK-47s, and some rather heavy guys in the back. Since 1991, war and famine have killed 500,000 people here. A transitional government was formed recently to end the chaos. This is opposed by the warlords in Mogadishu, and now a fresh civil war looms. We had to film secretly out of the windows so as not to anger the militias. Ambushes are common along this dirt road. There's no law and order, only gun rule and extortion. We've passed 4 checkpoints into town, each of which is controlled by a different faction leader or gang leader. Duguf has obviously made arrangements for them to open up quickly, because otherwise there can be real sticking points. Since Mogadishu's year zero, the city has collapsed. People cling on here as the African bush takes over. Whole buildings that were war damaged 14 years ago, but which now are just like ancient ruins. And yet there are, a very large population of people is living here. We're just about to pass the old Unisom base and the US Embassy and where all the UN troops were. This forest was once a fortress for 30,000 United Nations troops. They promised to bring Somalia democracy, justice and peace, and they failed utterly. Our fixer Dugov said if we walked the streets we'd be killed. After checking into this hotel 9 months ago, BBC producer Kate Payton walked across the road and was shot dead. There have been dozens of assassinations this year alone. Okay, here we are at Shamo's. Hopefully a safe haven. The city is awash with guns, smuggled in under the noses of Western warships. We wanted to find out how easy it would be to purchase a weapon in town, and it being too dangerous to go to the Bukhara market ourselves, we sent out for them to be delivered, which we got 3 choices. Probably all of them made in Central Asia. They look genuine, but these things are pretty readily available coming across the ocean, despite the fact that there's an arms embargo. And they're all pretty cheap. This is $250.
Yeah.
An AK-47 is what? About
200.
200.
Yeah.
So $200 for an AK-47, which is one of the most effective weapons that you can have, and certainly the cornerstone of all the conflicts in this continent. How much does a grenade cost?
The hand grenade, less than $10.
$10 for a hand grenade is very reasonably priced. It's about the price of a pizza.
You must, watch out what you are doing. Otherwise, the hand grenade is so cheap here in Mogadishu.
Bang, yeah. There we have it. My contacts told me the Islamic jihadis were already here. Backed by rich businessmen, they have 3,000 recruits in training. Most are Somalis, but there are foreigners here too. We wanted to interview Sheikh Hassan Dahir Awais, leader of the militants. America says he's linked to Al Qaeda and a string of bombings and killings in Africa. While waiting for the Sheikh to reply to our messages, we went to see Hussein Aidid, whose warlord father Mohammed Farah Aidid famously humiliated US forces. Foreign troops first arrived with bags of food to end a famine. 6 months later, they were using helicopters to machine gun civilian districts. The city never recovered from the damage. This is the area where the so-called Black Hawk Down battle occurred on October 3rd, 1993. 18 US Special Forces were killed, and later the Americans boasted that 1,000 Somalis were killed. Well, as it happens, most of them were civilians. Wreckage from the battle still litters the road. Memories haven't faded either, which is why America and her allies can't return to Mogadishu. When the movie Black Hawk Down was first shown here, a man in the audience got up with an AK-47 and opened fire at the screen. Hello, how are you? Good, how do you? Hello, how do you do? Okay, here we go. Hello. After the Americans abandoned Somalia, the elder Aidid took a bullet during a clan fight. He died in this house. Yeah. Yeah, you can leave that, yeah? You can hold that. His son, himself an ex-US Marine, took over as the new warlord, but the Islamic jihadis frightened him.
The terrorist cells in Somalia who have connection with terrorists is the Wahhabist, Al-Ittihad, Al-Salah, Al-Hijra wa Takfir, Al-Majma'. They have a good connection with Al Qaeda on the financial level. They are here, they are causing the assassination of the civil society leaders. They are a small minority, but when it comes to finance, they are very strong.
What are we talking about, millions?
Yes, they have millions, they have control most of the communication. They control most of the export-import, so they're not easy to go, and they are planning slowly, same like they were planning in Sudan. Same one they are planning all over Africa, taking the gold and everything. And they want land and resource. They want, the reason is their supporters are giving this money is to have resources.
So what Washington and the West dismissed as a nasty African backwater they could forget about has come back to haunt them. Not even warlords like Aidan are safe. You have been the target of an assassination attempt yourself.
9 times.
9 times?
I survived the 9 times. 9
extremist assassinations?
Last 9 years.
Right.
Yes, 1 average of the year. Mines were planted in front of my house. And car in front of me blew up where my whole security perished.
Are you in any way scared that you're going to be targeted again?
Definitely. That scare is there. That's why I'm even inside my house I'm wearing bulletproof.
You're wearing a flak jacket?
Yes.
Inside the house?
Yes,
Has that got a plate as well?
Yes. And
I was wondering.
Yes. So security is serious.
Thank you very much for saying. Thank you, Ali. That's great. Yeah, you got all of your chaps ready?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm making sure, especially after everything he said, that that we've got our full security complement waiting for us as we get outside. I mean, if that didn't put the wind up me, then nothing will. Where are we? Yeah?
I'll get in this.
Since we'd contacted their leader, the jihadis knew we were here. They were clearly watching us. But were they going to kill us? Days before our visit, gunmen invaded the house of a peace activist friend of mine and executed him in front of his wife. I've never felt this kind of fear in Mogadishu, even at the height of the civil war. I remember in the early days in Mogadishu, we used to literally catch buses and taxis across the front line. And what a different atmosphere it is. It just brings me back to my greatest thought about all of this, which is that you can't leave a country to its own devices. Terrorism, disease, refugees, all of these are domestic issues. And if you don't take notice of them in a faraway country, they're going to come back and bite you at home. Waiting for the militants' next move, we travelled to see what was happening outside the city. The West aims to contain Islamic extremism by building a wall around Somalia. But battleships and helicopters are not winning this war. Somalis need to be brought in from the cold to enjoy the rule of law, health, schools. The West pays lip service to these objectives with only a paltry aid budget. How many children are here? 110 children in this tiny, cramped space, probably half the size of a normal classroom in England. And do any of these schools get funding from elsewhere, or are they all funded by the community? It's the parents that give what they can to cover the costs of a little madrasa like this, and they're all incredibly poor, and as you can see it's a very ramshackle little school, very cramped. This little boy is writing verses or surah of the Quran with ink made from charcoal crushed up in water. He may have limited understanding of what it actually means, but he knows the script. And this is what all the kids will learn here. And when he's written the verse, it'll be washed off and written again, and these tablets will be used year after year. It's a central part of Islamic culture in Somalia as elsewhere in Africa. Diplomacy is needed to prevent fresh civil war. Soldiers from Somalia's Christian neighbour Ethiopia are training Somalis for the onslaught against Islamic forces. Here there are Ethiopian instructors talking in Amharic, giving instructions to each other and also to their Somali recruits. The people in Mogadishu who oppose the government say that they don't want to have Ethiopia involved. These forces are loyal to President Abdullahi Yusuf, head of Somalia's transitional government. The international community supported his appointment, but since then has given him almost no help. This has forced him to turn to Ethiopia, Somalia's old adversary, a recipe for war, not peace. We drove to see the president, where he's massing his forces in Johar, north of Mogadishu. Time is running out. The militants in Mogadishu have called President Yusuf the devil and declared jihad. Tell me, Mr. President, what are the consequences going to be if the international community does not give you the support to establish the government?
It seems that the Americans are hesitant to come back to Somalia to help with this government. But they have to understand that they were humiliated by a small faction, not the whole population of Somalia. So to banish the whole Somalis because of that happening, I think is not good policy. If the international community don't want to make peace in Somalia, this means they are supporting terrorists.
Do you fear conflict in the next few months?
Of course, if we will be attacked, we will defend ourselves. This is obvious.
The tide is running against the president and his army. These are the ruins of an old state secular school. In the war, schools like this were destroyed. An entire generation of kids missed out, became fighters or died. Now, money from Arab states is flowing in for religious schools. When people talk about the rise of extremism in a country like Somalia, really, there's no alternative for kids other than to go to a school which is offering an Islamic curriculum, because there is no alternative. And although the old government school now lies in ruins, what you'll notice behind me is that suddenly a mosque has sprouted up, looking new and white and clean, because the ruins of this school, or some of them, have been turned into a Saudi curriculum school for girls and boys, secondary level, where the teaching is in Arabic. And so that illustrates the story of what has happened to education in the country. The road led back to Mogadishu. There, we still hope to interview Sheikh Awais, the leader of the Islamic forces. No other Western journalist had ever met him. Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me, sir? He agreed to see us in his base on the other side of the city the next day. As our guards loaded their weapons, I wondered if we were driving into a trap. This was risky, but I knew it would be a big scoop. Awais is chairman of the Al Qaeda surrogate Al Ittihad Al Islamiyah, the most senior militant in the Horn of Africa. Even Duguf looked nervous. This is Awais' stronghold. Next door to us, a sermon blared out from a new mosque. It was erected over an old Italian cemetery. Awais' militias had dug up the Christian graves and thrown away the bones. We still didn't know if the Sheikh wanted us to film him, but clearly he felt secure here. I'm Aidan Hartley, Channel 4, and this is James Brabazon. What we would like to talk about is his organisation. This is an opportunity for the Sheikh to state his side of the story. Specifically, the Americans have accused your organisation, Al Ittihad Al Islamiyah, of links with Al Qaeda. Is this true or not?
أنو ما إهنين دمبيلة أو دمبيلة كبارة ما إهي لكن معنا سياسي أو مضي سو وهذا هي.
He says, I'm not a criminal. I advocate for the religious beliefs of my people, and he feels that the West is implacably opposed against his rightful beliefs. And he says, my main belief is to establish an Islamic government for Somalia. Would you like to see the Islamic government that you want to create in Somalia existing elsewhere in Africa?
الدنيا كلها كجعلها إن الإسلام كوجاني يعني قارها نوع علامتنا ولا كلا نوع علامتنا لكن وطن كيجا وحي مناسبة مبادئ الإسلام كنا كينيسو أيام ربنا إنا كلنا. He
says very clearly that he'd like to see Islamic government not only in Africa but across the whole world. So he's very clear about that, which is refreshing. Related to that, Sheikh, are you a man of peace or are you a man of jihad?
نبض واحد كميدا دقالك نبض بكميدا أوركا يعني both of them هذي نبض مناسب تهانا نبض عن وحكودين هذي دقالك مناسب يهانا دقالك حكودين.
The Sheikh says that if people can't reach their objectives peacefully, then they'll have to fight for them. And he accuses the West of fighting the Muslims using sophisticated weapons to do so, and of not wanting the Muslims to take their own stand. Outside, a gun-wielding guard shoved my producer and ordered him to stop filming.
No pictures there. No? Okay.
Some people were very unhappy about us being here. The message was clear. Thank you very much once again. Thank you. It was time to go. The Sheikh has declared jihad in Somalia as the first step towards his vision for global Islamic rule. After 9/11, America feared Somalia would become a haven for Al Qaeda and its ideology. Now that fear is being realized.
Next Saturday from 6, Unreported World visits Gaza as Israeli forces complete their withdrawal. 7:10 tonight, what motivates young people to become preachers in Hinduism, Islam and Christianity? Next tonight, news.